Chaos isn't just something that happens to us, it's the background noise of modern life. The constant notifications, the overwhelming demands, the unexpected setbacks that leave us feeling drained and reactive. But what if I told you there's a way to not just survive the chaos, but to thrive in it? That's exactly what the ancient Stoics promised over 2,000 years ago, and their wisdom is more relevant today than ever. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome during some of its most turbulent times, put it simply, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That's the heart of Stoicism, a toolkit for building unshakable mental resilience, no matter what life throws your way. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending everything's fine when it's not. Stoicism teaches us to see the world clearly, to distinguish between what we can control and what we can't, and to focus our energy where it actually matters. Imagine waking up each day with a sense of calm determination, knowing that no crisis can derail you because you've trained your mind to respond with clarity instead of panic. That's the transformative potential of these practices, and in this video, we're diving deep into 35 Stoic techniques designed to make you mentally indestructible. These aren't just abstract philosophies, they're battle-tested strategies used by everyone from gladiators to generals, from entrepreneurs to everyday people facing extraordinary challenges. Whether you're dealing with stress at work, personal setbacks, or just the overwhelming pace of modern life, these tools will help you reclaim your focus, your peace, and your power. By the end of this journey, you'll have a practical framework for turning obstacles into opportunities and chaos into clarity. So if you're ready to build a mind that doesn't just endure but thrives under pressure, let's begin. The first and most fundamental Stoic technique is mastering the dichotomy of control, a simple but life-changing mental shift. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's greatest philosophers, laid it out plainly. Some things are within our power while others are not. What he meant is that our power lies solely in our own choices, our judgments, actions, and reactions, while everything else, from other people's opinions to traffic jams to sudden setbacks, exists outside our control. The more we obsess over what we can't change, the more we drain our energy and amplify our suffering. But when we focus relentlessly on what we can influence, our effort, our attitude, our next move, we reclaim our agency. Take a typical stressful work scenario. Your boss criticizes a project you poured hours into. The instinctive reaction might be frustration, defensiveness, or anxiety about their opinion of you. But the Stoic approach asks, can you control their reaction? No. Can you control whether they're having a bad day or misinterpreted your work? No. What can you control? Your response. You can choose to dissect the feedback for useful insights, adjust your approach for next time, or even decide if their criticism is valid at all. The moment you make that shift, the emotional weight lifts because you're no longer fighting an unwinnable battle. You're directing your energy where it actually matters. This isn't about passivity, it's about precision. Stoics weren't advocating resignation to fate, they were teaching strategic focus. Think of it like archery. A skilled archer can control their stance, their aim, and the force they use to draw the bow. But once the arrow leaves the string, wind, distance, or even a moving target are out of their hands. Wasting energy agonizing over those uncontrollable factors won't change the outcome. But refining their technique, that's where real mastery happens. So here's a challenge. Recall a recent moment when you felt stressed or upset. Now ask yourself, how much of that distress came from things outside your control? And what would change if you redirected that energy toward your own actions and attitudes? This single mental habit practiced daily can dissolve mountains of unnecessary anxiety, because when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you free up an incredible amount of focus, the kind of focus that lets you move through chaos with purpose, not panic. Now let's explore one of the most counterintuitive yet powerful Stoic techniques: negative visualization. At first glance, it might sound pessimistic, deliberately imagining worst-case scenarios. But this isn't about dwelling on fear, it's about disarmament. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher and advisor to Emperor Nero, called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. His reasoning was razor-sharp. What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. In other words, by mentally rehearsing life's potential hardships, we strip them of their power to shock us. And in that space, we find something: unexpected gratitude. Picture this: you're about to give a big presentation at work. Instead of just hoping everything goes perfectly, take a moment to visualize the worst. The projector fails, your notes are out of order, someone interrupts with tough questions. Now ask yourself, could I handle that? The answer is almost always yes. Suddenly, the stakes feel lower because you've already faced the fear in your mind and survived. This practice doesn't just build resilience, it highlights how much we take for granted. When you imagine losing your job, you appreciate having one. When you think about a loved one's absence, you cherish them more deeply in the present. The beauty of negative visualization is its adaptability to everyday annoyances. Stuck in traffic, use it as a rehearsal for patience. Flight delayed. That's a chance to practice calm when plans unravel. Even minor frustrations become training grounds for the bigger challenges life will inevitably throw your way. The Stoics weren't suggesting we live in constant dread. They were teaching us to confront the fragile nature of reality head-on so we could stop clinging to illusions of control. Here's your challenge: pick one small inconvenience today: a long line at the grocery store, a slow internet connection, a rainy afternoon, and apply negative visualization. Before frustration kicks in, ask, what's the worst that could really happen here? Then notice how quickly your perspective shifts. What felt like an annoyance becomes trivial, and what remains is a quiet confidence that you can handle far more than you think. That's the secret. When you stop fearing the worst, you start seeing the best not as a guarantee, but as a gift. Amor Fati, the Latin phrase meaning love of fate, might sound like blind optimism at first, but it's actually something far more profound. Nietzsche, though not a Stoic himself, captured its essence perfectly. My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Now pair that with Marcus Aurelius, who wrote in his private journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Together, these ideas reveal a radical approach to life's curveballs, not just accepting them, but embracing them as necessary fuel for growth. Think of a tree growing on a windy cliffside. The constant battering of the wind forces its roots to dig deeper, its trunk to grow stronger. Without that resistance, it would never develop the resilience to survive. Our challenges work the same way. Take something as devastating as losing a job. The immediate reaction might be panic or self-doubt, but Amor Fati asks, what if this isn't an ending but a redirection? Maybe it's the push you needed to finally start that business, learn a new skill, or escape a toxic workplace. History is full of stories like this. Steve Jobs called getting fired from Apple the best thing that could have ever happened, because it led to his most creative years. The setback became the setup. This isn't about pretending hardships don't hurt. It's about recognizing that within every obstacle lies an opportunity. if we're willing to look for it. The Stoics didn't just tolerate fate, they actively engaged with it like a blacksmith hammering raw iron into something sharper and more useful, your assignment. Pick a recent setback, a missed promotion, a failed project, even a bad breakup, and ask yourself, how could this actually serve me? Maybe the rejection freed you for a better path. Maybe the failure taught you a lesson no success ever could. Here's the secret. When you stop resisting reality and start working with it, life stops feeling like a series of attacks and starts feeling like a collaboration. Amor Fati turns, "Why is this happening to me?" into, "What is this teaching me?" And in that shift, you don't just survive chaos, you begin to dance with it. Premeditatio Malorum, the Stoic practice of anticipating obstacles before they arise, is like mental armor forged in advance. Seneca put it bluntly, he robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand. This isn't about pessimism, it's about removing the element of surprise, the thing that magnifies suffering when life inevitably veers off course. Consider how ancient generals prepared for battle. They didn't just hope for the best, they rehearsed every possible disaster, ambushes, supply shortages, sudden storms, and devised countermeasures. When the chaos of war arrived, they weren't paralyzed by panic, they executed plans they'd already visualized. That's the power of Premeditatio Malorum. It turns the unknown into the familiar and fear into focus. Take a modern example, a critical business negotiation. Most people fixate on their ideal outcome, rehearsing perfect scenarios in their minds. But what if the other party rejects your terms? What if they bring up objections you haven't prepared for? By mentally walking through these hurdles beforehand, you're not inviting failure, you're building resilience. The Stoics knew that the mind rehearses what it expects. If you've already confronted potential setbacks in your imagination, they lose their sting when they materialize. This practice isn't just for crises, it works for daily irritations too. Running late for a meeting, imagine the traffic jam before it happens and you'll leave earlier. Hosting an event, visualize technical glitches and you'll have backup plans ready. Here's the twist, this exercise often reveals how much we inflate our fears. When you actually sit with a worst-case scenario, losing a client, facing a health scare, even public embarrassment, you realize two things. First, you'd likely adapt and survive. Second, the anticipation is usually worse than the reality. That's why Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The monster under the bed vanishes when you turn on the light. Your challenge this week, pick one upcoming task or goal, a difficult conversation, a project deadline, even a social gathering, and spend 5 minutes envisioning what could go wrong. Then ask, how would I respond? That simple act of preparation doesn't just reduce anxiety. It transforms you from a passive victim of circumstances into an active participant in your own life. Because when you've already faced the storm in your mind, the real rain feels like just another step in the dance. Memento Mori, the Stoic practice of reflecting on mortality, sounds morbid until you realize its true purpose, not to dwell on death but to illuminate life. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That's the paradox at the heart of this practice. By acknowledging the brevity of our time, we're forced to confront what truly deserves our attention. Imagine holding an hourglass where the sand represents your days. How many grains are wasted scrolling mindlessly, arguing over trivialities, or chasing things that don't align with your deepest values? Social media thrives on the illusion of infinite time. Endless feeds trick us into believing there's always tomorrow to start that project, mend that relationship, or pursue that passion. But the Stoics knew better. Seneca warned, "Life is long if you know how to use it." The average person spends years of their life lost in distractions, over 11,000 hours on social media alone by age 60. Memento Mori cuts through that fog. It's not about fear, it's about focus. When a CEO keeps a skull on their desk, as many ancient philosophers did, it's not a dark obsession, it's a daily reminder to ask, is this how I want to spend my irreplaceable hours? This practice reveals a startling truth. Most of what stresses us doesn't matter in the long arc of a lifetime. The rude comment, the missed opportunity, the petty rivalry, these shrink into insignificance when viewed through the lens of mortality. But it also highlights what does endure: the relationships we nurture, the work that fulfills us, the moments of presence and connection. Think of it as mental decluttering. Death is the ultimate editor, stripping away everything non-essential. Here's your challenge: grab paper and write down one thing you'd prioritize if you learned you had limited time left. Not a bucket list fantasy, but the core of what makes your life meaningful: reading to your children, creating art, serving others. Now ask, what's stopping you from making that your focus today? The answer isn't morbid, it's liberating. Because when you stop pretending you have forever, you start living like you mean it. Voluntary discomfort sounds counterintuitive in a world obsessed with convenience, but the Stoics understood its transformative power. Musonius Rufus, the philosopher who taught Epictetus, put it bluntly: how can anyone become courageous if they only seek comfort? His students were tasked with enduring hunger, cold, and physical hardship, not as punishment but as training. The logic was simple: by willingly facing small discomforts, we immunize ourselves against life's inevitable larger ones. Picture a muscle that only grows stronger under resistance. Your mind works the same way. Modern life has turned comfort into a default setting. Thermostats eliminate temperature fluctuations, delivery apps bypass hunger pangs, and endless entertainment shields us from boredom. But this constant ease comes at a cost. We become fragile. The moment the Wi-Fi drops or the coffee runs out, irritation flares. Voluntary discomfort reverses this conditioning. It's not about masochism, it's about reclaiming your resilience. Start small, skip a meal, and notice how hunger isn't an emergency, just a temporary sensation. Take a cold shower and observe how your body adapts after the initial shock. These acts dismantle the illusion that comfort equals safety, revealing your capacity to endure far more than you think. History's most resilient figures shared this practice. Theodore Roosevelt, sickly as a child, forced himself into brutal physical training to build stamina. Naval Special Forces recruits undergo drown-proofing drills not because they'll need to swim bound and gagged in combat, but to prove to themselves that panic can be controlled. The principle applies universally. Ever notice how the first few minutes of a workout feel unbearable, then your body finds its rhythm? Discomfort is often just a signal of transition, not danger. Here's your challenge. Pick one voluntary discomfort this week: walking without headphones to sit with your thoughts, waking up 30 minutes earlier, or fasting until lunch. The goal isn't to suffer, but to observe. Notice the stories your mind spins to avoid unease. This is pointless, or I can't handle this. Then watch as those stories dissolve when you stay present. Every time you choose discomfort over convenience, you're not just building tolerance, you're rewriting your relationship with adversity. Because when you've stood in the cold by choice, winter loses its bite. Marcus Aurelius never intended for his personal journals to become one of history's most revered philosophical works. He scribbled those words by candlelight, wrestling with his own doubts and flaws, addressing himself with brutal honesty. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That's the raw power of Stoic journaling, not flowery prose or performative self-help, but a mirror held up to your deepest thoughts. Think of it as a nightly debrief with your wiser self. Where did you let emotions override reason today? When did you confuse busyness with progress? These pages don't judge, they reveal. Modern science backs what the Stoics knew instinctively. Studies show that reflective writing reduces stress, clarifies decision-making, and even strengthens emotional resilience by creating space between stimulus and response. But there's a catch: most people journal wrong. They either vent endlessly, reinforcing negativity, or jot superficial gratitudes without deeper inquiry. Stoic journaling is different. It's structured, purposeful, and rooted in three core questions adapted from Epictetus. What did I try to control today that wasn't mine to control? Where did I act against my values? What's one small step toward virtue tomorrow? Start with a simple 3-day experiment. Night 1. Recall one moment where you reacted impulsively. Replay it in writing, not to self-criticize, but to identify the gap between what happened and how you interpreted it. Night 2. Examine a success. Did you earn it through deliberate action, or was it luck? Stoics distrusted chance victories because they don't build character. Night 3. Write a letter to yourself from the perspective of your future self, the person who's already overcome this challenge. What would they remind you is trivial? What would they urge you to focus on? The magic happens in the patterns. After just 3 days, most people notice recurring themes, perhaps an obsession with others' opinions or a tendency to conflate wants with needs. That's when journaling shifts from reflection to transformation. Like a sculptor chiseling away excess marble, you start removing mental clutter with every page. No fancy notebook required. Marcus wrote his meditations on battlefields. Seneca journaled between political scandals. What matters isn't the medium, but the merciless honesty. Your journal is the one place you can't lie to yourself, where excuses collapse under their own weight. So tonight, before sleep resets your mind, ask the question the Stoics asked for centuries: did I live today, or was I merely alive? The answer might surprise you. Marcus Aurelius had a habit of stepping back, way back. In his private writings, he often invoked what the Stoics called the view from above. Think of the whole of existence, of which you are the tiniest part. Think of the vast abyss of time against which your brief moment cannot be measured. This mental shift wasn't about diminishing our struggles, but revealing their true scale. Picture yourself hovering above Earth, watching continents drift, storms form and dissolve, civilizations rise and fall. From that vantage point, how significant is that rude email or traffic jam? The petty conflicts that consume us shrink into insignificance, while what truly matters, our values, relationships, growth, comes into sharp focus. Modern psychology confirms this ancient practice. Researchers at Stanford found that people who mentally zoom out on stressful situations experience lower emotional reactivity and make wiser decisions. It's why astronauts often return from space with overview effect, a profound shift in perspective where national borders and personal grudges vanish, replaced by awe for our shared fragility. You don't need a rocket ship to access this clarity. Next time you're stuck in an argument or paralyzed by anxiety, pause and ask, how will this feel in a week? A year, a decade, the heat of the moment cools when viewed through the lens of cosmic time. Try this exercise today. Close your eyes and imagine floating above your city, then your country, until the entire planet is a pale blue dot beneath you. Notice how small your worries appear against oceans and mountains that have endured millennia. That presentation that felt life or death, a speck, the criticism that kept you awake. A whisper lost in the wind. What remains is the quiet truth. You are part of something vast, temporary, and breathtaking. And in that awareness, you'll find something unexpected, not numbness, but freedom. Freedom to choose where to direct your limited time and energy because you've seen firsthand how little of it truly deserves either. Imagine you're sitting in your car, stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. Your first instinct might be to label this situation as bad, frustrating, unfair, a waste of precious time. But here's where Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery and exile, would challenge you. What actually makes this traffic jam bad? Is it the cars not moving, or is it your judgment about the cars not moving? That distinction is the essence of objective judgment, the Stoic practice of stripping away emotional interpretations to see events as they truly are, not as we fear or fantasize them to be. A traffic jam isn't inherently good or bad, it's just cars on a road moving slowly. The suffering comes from the stories we layer on top. I'll be late. This always happens to me. Why today? Those narratives trigger stress, not the traffic itself. The same principle applies to everything from a cancelled flight to a critical email. The event is neutral, our labeling gives it power. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. Try this reframe next time you're stuck in traffic. Instead of resisting the delay, observe it like a scientist. Notice how your body tenses, how your mind races to blame, then pause. What if this isn't an obstacle but an invitation? An unexpected pocket of time to listen to an audiobook, call a friend, or simply breathe. The traffic hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. That's the alchemy of objective judgment, transforming leaden frustrations into golden opportunities for presence. Your turn. Pick one annoyance from this week, a long queue, a noisy neighbor, a misplaced item, and dissect it with Stoic clarity. Ask, what are the raw facts minus my emotional spin? Then watch as the weight lifts, because when you stop calling things bad, they stop holding you hostage. What remains is just life, unfolding, neutral, workable, and far more peaceful than you imagined. Seneca once warned, be silent more than you speak, for the tongue is a wild beast. Once loosed, it's hard to cage. In our world of constant noise, endless notifications, background chatter, the pressure to fill every silence, the Stoics recognized a profound truth. Speech is powerful, but so is restraint. Imagine your words as currency. Every unnecessary sentence spends energy you could invest elsewhere, in listening, observing, or simply being present. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius would begin his days in deliberate silence, not as a ritual but as training. By withholding speech, he sharpened his ability to choose words with precision, ensuring they carried weight rather than wasted breath. This isn't about muting yourself out of fear or shyness. It's about reclaiming agency over your attention. Think of the last time you spoke impulsively, maybe venting frustration or agreeing to something you later regretted. Silence creates a buffer between impulse and action, a space where wisdom can intervene. The Stoics called this discipline of assent, the practice of pausing before reacting, ensuring your words align with reason, not just reflexes. Picture a courtroom where every sentence must pass the judge of your highest self before leaving your lips. How many of your daily conversations would survive that scrutiny? Here's a challenge. Try a day of minimal talking. Not total silence. Stoicism isn't monasticism, but intentional speech. Before speaking, ask, is this necessary? Is it kind? Does it improve upon silence? You'll quickly notice how much chatter is autopilot, gossip, complaints, idle opinions. But you'll also discover something surprising, the clarity that emerges when you stop narrating life and start experiencing it. Conversations become richer because you're truly listening, not just waiting to speak. Decisions feel steadier because you've given yourself room to think. Even conflicts lose their edge when you respond with measured words instead of heated reactions. The real test comes in moments of tension. When someone criticizes you, the ego begs to retaliate. But silence here isn't weakness, it's strategy. Like a chess player refusing a reckless move, you preserve your power. Seneca observed, "A wise person can be hurt but never insulted." By choosing silence over sparring, you reveal the insult's hollowness. It's not bottling up emotions, it's refusing to let others dictate your inner state. Try this today. Carry a small notebook. Each time you resist an unnecessary comment, jot down what you would have said. By evening, review it. How much of that speech was truly essential? You might find whole categories of conversation defensiveness, people-pleasing, self-promotion, that drain more than they give, and in their absence you'll notice something else, the quiet confidence of someone who speaks not to fill space but to change it. There's a quiet power in action that speaks louder than words, especially when no one's watching. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled one of history's most powerful empires, scribbled this reminder to himself: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That's the essence of the Stoic discipline of action, aligning your deeds with virtue, not for applause or recognition, but because it's who you choose to be. The Stoics didn't just theorize about goodness, they built it into their daily lives through small, deliberate acts. Imagine a world where people didn't just post about kindness on social media, but practiced it in the shadows, where integrity wasn't performative but habitual. That's the world the Stoics aim to create, starting with themselves. Consider volunteering at a homeless shelter. The virtuous act isn't in the Instagram post afterward, it's in the unrecorded moments. The way you listen to someone's story without judgment, the extra minute you take to pour coffee with care, the decision to show up even when no one knows you did. Marcus called this the art of living, doing good quietly without fanfare, because virtue is its own reward. Modern research backs this up. Studies show that anonymous acts of kindness boost well-being more than public ones, precisely because they strip away ego's craving for credit. When you help without attaching your name, you're not building your reputation, you're building your character. This discipline extends beyond grand gestures. It's in the micro choices, returning the shopping cart when no one's watching, leaving a larger tip for a struggling server, or resisting the urge to gossip even when it would earn laughs. These are the moments that reveal who you really are when the spotlight's off and the only audience is your conscience. The Stoics knew that integrity isn't forged in the glare of public approval, but in the quiet corners of ordinary life. Here's your challenge: perform one anonymous act of kindness this week. Pay for a stranger's coffee and leave before they can thank you. Tape quarters to a laundromat dryer with a note saying, "For whoever needs it." The key is secrecy, not just for the recipient's sake, but for yours. Notice how it feels to do good without the dopamine hit of praise. That's the Stoic test. If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it still make a sound? If you do good and no one sees it, does it still matter? The answer, whispered across 2,000 years, is yes, because virtue isn't about optics. It's about the silent alignment between what you believe and how you behave, one unseen act at a time. Epictetus, born into slavery and later becoming one of history's most influential philosophers, had a simple but radical piece of advice. Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish, but wish for everything to happen as it does. That's the heart of acceptance, not passive resignation, but an active cooperation with reality. Picture standing in an open field during a sudden downpour. You have two choices: curse the sky and get drenched in misery, or open your arms and laugh at the absurdity of it all. The rain falls either way, but your resistance, or lack of it, determines whether you suffer. This principle applies to far more than weather. Think of cancelled flights, missed promotions, or unexpected setbacks, life's equivalent of storms. The instinct is to fight what's already happened, to replay scenarios where things went differently. But acceptance asks, what if this had to happen, not because of some grand cosmic plan, but because it did? The Stoics called this Amor Fati, loving fate. When you stop arguing with reality, you free up energy previously wasted on denial and redirect it toward constructive action. A delayed flight becomes reading time. A failed project reveals gaps in your skill set. Even grief, when fully allowed, carves deeper capacity for joy. Here's the paradox: acceptance isn't weakness, it's the ultimate leverage. Martial artists know this well. When you resist an opponent's force head-on, you exhaust yourself. But when you yield and redirect their energy, you control the flow. Life operates the same way. The client who rejects your proposal, that's data guiding you toward better fit opportunities. The relationship that ended. Space for something more aligned. Resistance keeps you stuck in "why me?" while acceptance propels you into "what now?" Your challenge today: pick one inconvenience, a traffic jam, a power outage, a last-minute change, and practice full surrender. Don't just tolerate it, lean into it. Notice how the moment loses its sharp edges when you stop demanding it be different. The Stoics weren't teaching us to like every circumstance, but to stop letting our preferences dictate our peace. Because when you make room for reality, exactly as it is, you'll find it makes room for you too. Seneca wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius that cut straight to the heart of modern anxiety. How much better to heal your own life than to win the applause of strangers? 2,000 years later, we've built entire platforms dedicated to that very illusion, trading our peace for likes, our authenticity for viral moments. The Stoics called this contempt for fame, not because achievement was worthless, but because external validation is a fickle master. Imagine spending years crafting something meaningful, only to measure its worth by the fleeting reactions of people scrolling past it on their lunch break. That's the trap. Applause in ancient Rome faded by sunset. Today's trending hashtag disappears by morning. Yet we keep chasing both like they're oxygen. There's a revealing exercise in Seneca's letters where he imagines his own death. Not morbidly, but practically. Who would mourn, who would pretend, who would forget before the funeral pyre cooled? His point wasn't about popularity, it was about perspective. When you visualize the impermanence of reputation, you start creating for better reasons. Think of the artists, writers, and entrepreneurs you truly admire. Chances are their work resonated because it was born from conviction, not calculation. Van Gogh sold one painting in his lifetime. Emily Dickinson wrote nearly 2,000 poems unseen. Their legacies outlasted every influencer of their era precisely because they weren't shaping their craft to fit the crowd. Social media has warped this further, turning approval into a dopamine drip. Every notification triggers the same primal circuits that once kept us safe in tribes, except now, the tribe is endless and safety is an illusion. The Stoics would have recognized this instantly, external validation as a false god. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but wrote, "It's silly to refuse praise from others while craving their admiration in secret." That's the paradox. We pretend not to care while obsessively tracking followers, refining personas, editing our lives into highlight reels. Here's the experiment. Post something online today, a thought, a photo, a creation, and don't check the reactions. Not for an hour, not for a day. Sit with the discomfort of not knowing if it's landed. That unease is the gap between your true worth and the counterfeit currency of clicks. Over time, that gap becomes creative freedom, because when you stop performing for invisible judges, you start discovering what actually matters to you. Fame, Seneca warned, is like seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. But self-respect, that's a spring that never runs dry. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it." That's the Stoic secret, not just enduring obstacles, but letting them become the very fuel that propels you forward. Consider the story of pro surfer Bethany Hamilton, who lost her arm to a shark attack at 14. In one brutal moment, her career built on balance, strength, and precision seemed impossible. But here's what the Stoics would have admired. She didn't just recover, she reinvented. Within a month, she was back on her board. Within a year, she was competing again. The obstacle, the horrific injury, became the catalyst for something unexpected. A new way of surfing, a deeper resilience, and ultimately, a platform to inspire millions. This isn't about toxic positivity, pretending every setback is a blessing. It's about recognizing that adversity has a unique way of stripping away the non-essential, forcing us to innovate. Think of a forest fire, destructive in the moment, but also clearing space for new growth. When your usual path is blocked, you discover paths you never would have considered. A laid-off employee starts the business they'd been too afraid to launch. A failed project reveals a critical flaw in your approach. Even heartbreak can carve out emotional depth that enriches future relationships. The Stoics called this antifragility, the phenomenon where certain things don't just survive chaos but thrive because of it. Your challenge today: take one current obstacle, a rejection, a limitation, a fear, and ask, how could this accelerate me? If you're struggling financially, maybe it's the push to finally learn budgeting skills. If you're feeling stuck in your career, perhaps it's the sign to explore a hidden passion. The key is to stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this making possible?" Because the greatest breakthroughs rarely come from comfort, they emerge from the friction between where you are and where you're determined to go. That's the alchemy the Stoics mastered, turning leaden setbacks into golden momentum. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery and exile, left us with a razor-sharp insight. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That pause, often no longer than a heartbeat, is where Stoic mastery lives. Picture this: you're driving home after a long day when another car swerves into your lane, nearly clipping your bumper. Your body tenses, your pulse spikes, and your hand hovers over the horn. That split second before reaction, that's the battleground. Most people lose this fight on autopilot, erupting into shouts or gestures they'll regret by dinner. But the Stoics trained for this moment like athletes preparing for the Olympics, because they knew whoever controls that pause controls their life. Road rage is just one visible example. The same principle applies to every email that makes your blood boil, every offhand comment that stings, every minor inconvenience that threatens to hijack your mood. Neuroscience confirms what Epictetus intuited. The amygdala, our brain's alarm system, triggers reactions in milliseconds, but the prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoned judgment, takes a few critical seconds longer to engage. That gap is your window of opportunity. Ancient Stoics practiced this through premeditation, mentally rehearsing provocations so their cooler heads could prevail in real time. Here's how to reclaim that space. Next time you feel reactionary heat rising, physically still your body first. A clenched fist can't unclench without the mind's permission. Then borrow a tactic from Marcus Aurelius and ask, what would my best self do here? Not the tired, stressed version of you, the version you aspire to be. That slight delay rewires your brain over time, creating what psychologists call response flexibility, the ability to choose rather than default. Try this today. Pick one trivial annoyance, a slow-moving pedestrian, a jammed printer, and treat it as a Stoic drill. When irritation flares, freeze, count 3 breaths. Notice how the urge to react dissipates like a wave pulling back from shore. What remains isn't passivity but power, the quiet confidence of someone who dictates their actions rather than being dragged by them. Because in that pause lies something extraordinary, the chance to rewrite your story mid-sentence. Marcus Aurelius gazed at the stars one night and wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." That simple line captures Sympatheia, the Stoic concept that we're all threads in the same tapestry, vibrating with shared humanity. In an age where algorithms amplify division and screens separate us from real faces, this ancient idea isn't just philosophical, it's urgent. The Stoics saw the world as a living organism. When one part suffers, the whole feels it. Cut your finger, and your entire body rushes to heal the wound. Yet modern life trains us to see others as abstract political labels, social media avatars, obstacles in traffic. Sympatheia asks us to remember that rude stranger. They're fighting battles you can't see. The colleague who disagrees with you, they love their family as fiercely as you love yours. Consider the Roman practice of Memento Mori applied to relationships. When we remember that every person we meet will one day be dust just like us, petty conflicts lose their edge. Marcus wrote, "To feel affection for people even when they make mistakes is uniquely human." Not tolerance, but active goodwill. This isn't about agreeing with everyone. It's about recognizing their inherent worth. A Stoic teacher might have assigned this exercise. Sit in a crowded square and silently acknowledge that every passerby has known joy, grief, and private struggles as vivid as your own. Suddenly, us versus them collapses into just us. The modern world tests this daily. Scroll through any comment section, and you'll find tribes shouting past each other. But Sympatheia offers an antidote. Seek first to understand. The next time you're tempted to dismiss someone, pause and ask, what pain or fear might drive their stance? A Ukrainian soldier and a Russian conscript both miss their children's laughter. A protester and a police officer both want safety for their communities. This doesn't erase real conflicts, but it roots them in shared humanity rather than dehumanization. Your challenge today: reach across an invisible line. Compliment the coworker you usually avoid. Listen, truly listen, to a relative whose views unsettle you. Not to debate, but to discover one thing you've never understood about their perspective. The Stoics knew what neuroscience now confirms. Empathy isn't fixed, it's a muscle. Every time you choose connection over contempt, you stretch it wider. And in that stretching, you'll find something unexpected, not just patience for others, but peace for yourself. Because hatred is a burden, Sympatheia is the act of setting it down. Seneca once wrote, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." That's the essence of the Stoic reserve clause, a simple but profound mental shift where we append, fate permitting, to every plan, ambition, and expectation. Picture this: you've spent months saving for a dream vacation, flights booked, itinerary perfected, excitement bubbling. Then a hurricane grounds all flights. Without the reserve clause, this feels like a personal betrayal by the universe. With it, just another reminder that our control is smaller than we'd like to admit. The Stoics weren't suggesting we stop making plans. They were teaching us to hold them lightly, like sand rather than stone. This practice isn't about pessimism, it's about precision. Ancient sailors understood this intuitively. They'd chart a course but knew storms, winds, or pirates could alter their path at any moment. The reserve clause is that same maritime wisdom applied to daily life. When you say, "I'll finish this project by Friday, fate permitting," you're not doubting your capability, you're acknowledging reality's unpredictability. Seneca put it bluntly, nothing is ours except time, not our health, not our relationships, not even the next breath. Recognizing this doesn't weaken resolve, it strengthens resilience. Modern life bombards us with illusions of control. Calendars packed months in advance, subscriptions auto-renewing, careers mapped out in 5-year increments. But the pandemic showed how quickly those illusions shatter. The reserve clause isn't surrender, it's strategic humility. Think of a farmer planting seeds. They can till the soil and water diligently, but drought or hail remains beyond their power. The Stoic farmer would say, "I'll harvest in August, fate permitting," then focus entirely on the work within their control. Here's your challenge. Take one current goal, a promotion, a fitness target, even dinner plans, and say it aloud with the reserve clause attached. Feel how it loosens the grip of attachment while sharpening your commitment to the process. That slight pause between intention and expectation is where freedom lies, because when you stop conflating effort with entitlement, you discover something remarkable. You can pour your whole heart into plans while remaining unshaken when they change. The reserve clause doesn't diminish your ambition, it liberates you from its tyranny. Try it today, whisper it to yourself as you make coffee. "I'll have a productive day, fate permitting." Notice how it softens frustration when interruptions arise. The meeting that got cancelled, the traffic that made you late, just fate exercising its permission. And in that space between your will and life's unpredictability, you'll find the quiet strength the Stoics mastered, the ability to strive fiercely while surrendering gracefully. Epictetus drew a line in the sand that still unsettles us today. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. This cuts to the core of the Stoic concept of indifference, things neither good nor bad in themselves, but which we inflate with false importance. The ancient philosophers divided these into preferred indifference, health, wealth, comfort, and dispreferred indifference, illness, poverty, discomfort. The key word, indifferent, not meaningless but neutral, like chess pieces that only gain value based on how skillfully we play them. A modern CEO might spend decades chasing promotions only to collapse from stress-induced illness, while a janitor with sound sleep and strong relationships could embody deeper fulfillment. The Stoics weren't condemning success, they were exposing our cultural hypnosis that equates external markers with worth. Consider two athletes. One obsessively tracks endorsements and social media metrics, while the other focuses solely on mastering their craft. Both may achieve wealth, but the first tethers their self-esteem to fickle external validation, while the second remains anchored in something unshakable. This distinction transforms how we approach everything from careers to relationships. Your job title, indifferent, the integrity you bring to it, priceless. The size of your home, irrelevant, the warmth within its walls, everything. Materialism thrives on conflating possessions with identity, your car as status, your clothes as worth. But the Stoics practiced a radical detachment, admiring fine things without needing to own them. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, routinely lived like a pauper for days to remind himself, "I own nothing but possess everything." Modern psychology echoes this. Studies show experiences bring lasting joy, while material purchases offer fleeting dopamine hits. That luxury watch won't comfort you during a crisis, but the resilience built through Stoic practice will. Here's the litmus test. List 3 things you secretly believe define your success, maybe a salary figure, a relationship milestone, or social media followers. Now imagine losing them while retaining your character, values, and ability to choose your response. Would you still feel whole? The discomfort you sense is the gap between true worth and borrowed value. Epictetus challenged his students. If you wish to be rich, don't seek more money, seek fewer needs. That inversion is liberation, because when applause fades and markets crash, what remains isn't what you accumulated, but who you became in the process. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal that became one of history's most profound works, not because he wrote from a palace, but because he wrote from the battlefield of daily life. One entry reads, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the essence of the Stoic test, the practice of treating every challenge as an exam where the subject isn't algebra or history, but your own character. Picture life as a relentless professor handing out pop quizzes, a missed train testing your patience, a harsh critique probing your humility, a failed project measuring your resilience. The goal isn't to ace every test, it's to show up for them with eyes wide open, recognizing that growth happens not in spite of obstacles, but because of them. Take a brutal workday, the kind where deadlines loom, emails pile up, and co-workers seem determined to fray your last nerve. Most people white-knuckle through it, counting minutes until escape. But the Stoic approach flips the script. What if this isn't just chaos to endure, but a carefully designed lab to practice virtues? Patience gets its workout when the printer jams for the third time. Courage flexes when you have to deliver uncomfortable feedback. Even humor gets its moment when the universe seems to conspire against your sanity. Marcus called these gifts from the gods disguised as hardships, not because suffering is noble, but because it reveals what we're made of. History's most resilient figures shared this mindset. Thomas Edison watched his laboratory burn to the ground at 67, losing years of research. His response, "Thank goodness all our mistakes were burned up, now we can start fresh." That's the Stoic test in action, a refusal to see disaster as anything but a forced reset. Or consider Malala Yousafzai, who transformed an assassination attempt into a global platform for education. The test wasn't the bullet, it was her choice to let bitterness or purpose win. Here's your challenge: identify your current Stoic test. Maybe it's a financial strain teaching you resourcefulness, or a strained relationship demanding forgiveness. Ask, what virtue is this situation asking me to strengthen? Then reframe the struggle as training, not punishment. A runner doesn't curse the hill, they know it's building their endurance. Your obstacles are no different. The sleepless nights with a newborn, a masterclass in patience, the project that fell apart, a crash course in adaptability. The beauty of this practice is its immediacy. You don't need to wait for life's big crises to start applying it. Even minor irritations, a misplaced key, a delayed package, become micro-exams. The key is to catch yourself mid-reaction and ask, what's being tested here? Your temper, your perspective, your ability to let go. Because every time you recognize the test, you graduate from passive victim to active student. And in that shift, you'll find something unexpected, not just endurance, but gratitude for the very things that once made you grit your teeth. After all, a life without tests would be like a sword never tempered by fire, shiny perhaps, but too soft to cut through anything real. Seneca once wrote, "When the mind has been given over to undisturbed reflection, it investigates its own nature and that of the universe." This is why the Stoics didn't just stumble into their days or collapse exhausted at night. They bookended time with intention. Picture two pillars holding up the bridge of your day, a morning ritual to set your course, and an evening practice to review your voyage. These weren't elaborate ceremonies. They were simple, sacred pauses, like a blacksmith inspecting his tools before and after forging steel. Start your morning like Marcus Aurelius did, not by reaching for your phone, but by reaching inward. Before the world floods your mind with demands, ask, what's one virtue I want to embody today? Not a to-do list, but a quality patience during meetings, courage in a difficult conversation, or presence with your family. The Stoics knew that without this compass, external chaos would dictate your direction. Then take 3 breaths so deep they feel like anchors. Ancient warriors did this before battle to steady their nerves. You're doing it before the modern battlefield of distractions. Now fast forward to evening. Seneca's nightly ritual was disarmingly simple. He'd replay his day like a film, scene by scene, not to brood over mistakes, but to observe with gentle precision. Where did I act with integrity? Where did fear or ego steer me off course? He called this the judge and witness exercise, your wiser self presiding over the day's courtroom. No verdicts, just clarity. Maybe you snapped at a coworker when fatigue set in, or perhaps you paused instead of reacting when your child spilled their drink. These moments aren't failures or victories, they're data points for growth. Here's your template for tomorrow. 5 minutes at dawn to name your intention. 5 minutes at dusk to reflect without judgment. No journals required. This can happen in the shower or during a walk. The key is consistency, not complexity. Think of it as mental hygiene, brushing your mind's teeth twice a day to prevent the decay of autopilot living. The magic lies in the compound effect. Over weeks, you'll notice patterns. Perhaps impatience flares when you skip breakfast, or creativity blooms after time in nature. These insights become your personal operating manual. And on days when chaos reigns, the rituals remain tiny islands of agency in the storm. Because as Seneca knew, the unexamined life isn't just unfulfilling, it's exhausting. But when you bookend your days with purpose, you're no longer swept along by the current. You become the riverbed shaping the flow. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught that true strength isn't found in muscles or wealth, but in the cultivation of 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These weren't abstract ideals to the Stoics, they were daily practices, lenses through which to view every decision. Picture them as a compass, wisdom as the needle pointing true north, courage as the steady hand holding it, justice as the map ensuring no one is left behind, and temperance as the counterweight keeping the whole system balanced. Let's start with wisdom, not just knowledge, but the discernment to separate signal from noise. Imagine scrolling through a barrage of conflicting advice online. One expert says intermittent fasting is the key to health, another warns it's dangerous. Stoic wisdom asks, what's the underlying principle? Not who's right, but what aligns with reason and nature. It's the difference between blindly following trends and pausing to ask, does this serve my greater purpose? Apply this to a modern dilemma like career choices. Wisdom wouldn't chase the highest paying job or the trendiest startup, it would ask, where can I grow? Where does my effort create real value? Then there's courage, often misunderstood as the absence of fear. The Stoics redefined it as action despite fear. Think of a nurse walking into a pandemic ward, knees trembling but hands steady, or a single parent working 2 jobs while studying at night, not because they're unafraid of failing, but because their love is louder than their doubts. Courage isn't just for battlefields, it's in the small moments too, saying, I was wrong, setting boundaries, or leaving a toxic situation when everyone else expects you to stay. Justice to the Stoics wasn't just courtroom fairness, it was active goodwill toward others. Marcus Aurelius wrote, what's bad for the hive is bad for the bee. In today's hyper-individualistic world, this virtue feels radical. Picture a CEO choosing smaller profits to pay living wages, or a neighbor shoveling an elderly stranger's driveway without expectation of thanks. Justice whispers, your freedom ends where another's begins. It's the antidote to every us versus them narrative, reminding us that exploitation and indifference always circle back like boomerangs. Temperance is the unsung hero of the four, the art of enough, not abstinence but harmony. Consider our relationship with technology, endless scrolling versus intentional use. Or food, deprivation versus nourishment. The Stoics weren't ascetics, they celebrated life's pleasures in right measure. Seneca, wealthy by any standard, practiced poverty periodically not to punish himself, but to remember, he who is not satisfied with a little is satisfied with nothing. Here's your challenge before sunset: pick one virtue to amplify. Maybe it's wisdom, pausing before reacting to a provocation, or courage, finally having that difficult conversation. Justice could mean tipping generously despite mediocre service, recognizing unseen struggles. Temperance might look like setting your phone aside during dinner, fully present with those around you. The goal isn't perfection but awareness. As Zeno taught, virtue isn't a destination, it's the path itself, paved one deliberate choice at a time. Epictetus once offered a refreshing perspective on wisdom. Don't seek to have everything that happens happen as you wish, but wish for everything to happen as it does, and your life will go well. That's the essence of the Stoic sage, not some unattainable, flawless figure perched on a mountaintop, but someone who embraces reality with clear eyes and steady resolve. The Stoics envisioned the sage as the embodiment of perfect wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, a North Star to guide us, not a finish line to cross. What's fascinating is how they acknowledged that even their greatest philosophers, from Zeno to Marcus Aurelius, fell short of this ideal. The point wasn't perfection, it was progress. Think of modern parallels: figures like Nelson Mandela, who transformed bitterness into reconciliation after 27 years in prison, or Malala Yousafzai, who channeled trauma into global advocacy. These aren't saints without flaws, but people who consistently chose virtue over victimhood. The Stoic sage isn't about never feeling anger or fear. It's about returning to center when those emotions arise. Picture a seasoned captain steering through a storm, not preventing the waves, but adjusting the sails. Here's where the Stoic ideal diverges from modern self-help. Social media peddles, optimized versions of ourselves, productivity gurus who never procrastinate, spiritual coaches who never doubt. The sage, by contrast, is relatable precisely because they're human. Seneca admitted to losing his temper. Marcus Aurelius wrote himself reminders to stop complaining. Their wisdom lay in recognizing their stumbles, not denying them. So who's your sage? Not a distant historical figure, but someone in your orbit, maybe a grandparent whose quiet resilience taught you more than any lecture, or a colleague who navigates office politics with unshakable integrity. Identify one trait they embody that you admire, perhaps their ability to listen deeply or their refusal to gossip. Now here's the challenge. For the next week, consciously mirror that trait in small ways. Not to become them, but to awaken that potential in yourself, because the sage isn't out there waiting to be discovered, they're within, patiently taking shape with every mindful choice. As Epictetus put it, no great thing is created suddenly, not an olive tree, not a diamond, and certainly not wisdom. It's the daily drip of effort that eventually carves canyons. Seneca's piercing words still echo across 2,000 years. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. His essay on the shortness of life wasn't just a meditation on mortality. It was a wake-up call to stop confusing motion with progress. Consider how modern life amplifies this illusion. We cram calendars with meetings, scroll endlessly through feeds, and juggle notifications like circus performers, all while complaining there aren't enough hours in the day. But Seneca would argue the problem isn't time scarcity, it's our misallocation of attention. The average person will spend over 5 years of their life on social media, yet claim they're too busy to learn a language, start a business, or heal a fractured relationship. That's the paradox. We treat life like an infinite resource while frittering away its most precious currency on distractions dressed as necessities. Procrastination thrives on this disconnect. It's not laziness, it's a failure of imagination. When we delay meaningful work for someday, we're betting on a future we can't guarantee. The Stoics had a remedy, Memento Mori, the practice of remembering death not to incite fear, but to ignite urgency. Picture this: if you learned you had 1 year left, how quickly would later become today? That email you've been avoiding, that creative project gathering dust, that conversation you keep postponing, suddenly, they'd rocket to the top of your list. Seneca observed, "We are dying every day. Each sunset is a page torn from a calendar you'll never reprint." Here's where auditing comes in. For 1 week, track your time like a forensic accountant. Not just work versus leisure, but the quality of each hour. How many are spent mindlessly consuming versus intentionally creating? How often do you trade deep focus for dopamine hits? Be brutally honest. Those quick checks of news or messages often add up to entire workdays lost per month. One executive discovered he spent 11 hours weekly just reorganizing his inbox time that could have built a side business or deepened family connections. The audit isn't about guilt, it's about reclaiming agency. Your challenge: eliminate one-time waster starting today, not forever, just for 7 days. Maybe it's disabling notifications after 6 p.m. or setting a 20-minute daily limit on entertainment apps. The goal isn't deprivation, but discovery, what emerges when you silence the noise. A musician client of mine deleted TikTok for a month and wrote an album's worth of lyrics in the reclaimed hours. Another replaced morning scrolls with journaling and noticed her anxiety plummet. Seneca wasn't suggesting we eliminate all leisure, but that we stop letting trivialities masquerade as priorities. The true measure of this practice isn't minutes saved, but life reclaimed. Because when you stop postponing what matters, you make a startling discovery: there was always enough time. You were just spending it on the wrong things. As Seneca wrote, life is long if you know how to use it. The sand in your hourglass isn't the problem, it's where you let it fall. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That's the essence of the Inner Citadel, the Stoic practice of fortifying your mind like an impregnable castle, where no external chaos can breach the walls. Picture this: you're the ruler of a vast fortress surrounded by enemies, stress, criticism, uncertainty, all pounding at the gates. The walls tremble, but inside the central tower you remain calm. Why? Because you've designed this stronghold with layers of defense, each one filtering out what doesn't deserve your attention. The Stoics knew that while we can't control the sieges of life, we can always control what we let inside the gates. Think of your senses as the castle's outer walls. Every day they're bombarded with stimuli, alarms, headlines, other people's demands. Most people let these invaders storm straight into the courtyard, wreaking havoc on their peace. But the Stoic practice of prosouch attention acts like a gatekeeper, scrutinizing what gets through. That angry email, it doesn't automatically earn entry. The traffic jam, it can wait outside. Even physical pain, as Marcus noted, cannot touch the soul unless the soul first gives it assent. The moment you stop confusing external events with your internal reality, you reclaim sovereignty over your inner world. Now visualize your citadel's inner chambers. Here's where your core values reside: justice, courage, wisdom, guarded like precious artifacts. No siege can destroy these unless you hand them over willingly. History offers striking examples. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in a cell, yet his inner citadel remained unbroken. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz by realizing everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude. Their bodies were imprisoned, but their minds inviolable. Here's how to build yours. Start with the foundation, your breath. When chaos mounts, pause and take 3 slow inhales. This isn't just calming, it's architectural. You're reinforcing the bedrock of your citadel. Next, identify your outer walls, the boundaries protecting your attention. Maybe it's turning off notifications after sunset or refusing to engage with toxic debates. Then, fortify your inner chambers by clarifying your non-negotiables. What virtues will you defend at all costs? For Marcus, it was integrity. For Epictetus, it was freedom of choice. For you, only you can decide. The final test comes when the siege is real. A betrayal, a financial loss, a health scare, these are the moments when your citadel proves its design. But here's the secret the Stoics understood. You don't wait for the siege to start building. You train in peacetime so you're ready for war. Tonight, as you lie in bed, imagine your citadel in vivid detail. Where are its weak points? What virtues stand guard at the heart of it? Because when the world outside feels like it's crumbling, you'll always have a place of unshakable stillness within. Epictetus drew a line in the sand that still guides us today. Some things are up to us and some are not. This simple distinction forms the Stoic fork, a mental tool that forces us to choose between 2 paths, taking action where we can, or practicing acceptance where we can't. Imagine standing at a literal fork in the road every time life presents a challenge. One path is paved with effort, what you can influence. The other is lined with surrender, what you must release. The wisdom lies in knowing which path to take. Take a tense workplace scenario. Your manager publicly dismisses your idea in a meeting. The initial sting might send you spiraling into self-doubt or resentment. But the Stoic fork interrupts that autopilot reaction with a clarifying question. What here is truly mine to control? You can't dictate your boss's opinions or the team's reactions. Those belong on the acceptance path. But your next move, that's yours. You might request constructive feedback privately, refine your proposal with new data, or even decide this environment isn't aligned with your growth. The fork doesn't promise the outcome will change, only that you'll stop wasting energy fighting unwinnable battles. The brilliance of this practice is its adaptability. Stuck in traffic, the fork asks, can you magically clear the road? No, but you can control whether this delay becomes a moment of patience or frustration. Facing a health diagnosis, you may not control the illness, but you command how you respond to treatment, what mindset you cultivate, and where you direct your focus. Even in grief, the fork remains while loss itself is unavoidable. Your relationship to it isn't predetermined. Here's the subtle shift that makes this more than just problem solving. The Stoic fork isn't about choosing action or acceptance. It's about applying each fully where they belong. Too often, we do the opposite, obsessing over things we can't change while neglecting the agency we do have. Social media amplifies this dysfunction. We rage over distant political dramas we can't influence, yet ignore the kindness we could show a neighbor today. The fork cuts through that noise. Your challenge tonight: reflect on one current struggle, draw 2 columns on paper: within my power and beyond my control. Fill them ruthlessly, then star 1 item from the first column and act on it within 24 hours. Not next week, not when conditions are perfect now. Because the Stoic fork isn't a philosophy to ponder, it's a decision to make again and again until choosing wisely becomes second nature. As Epictetus knew, freedom isn't about controlling life's twists, it's about mastering your turns. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, would periodically ditch his riches to sleep on a hard floor and eat stale bread. This wasn't self-punishment, it was strategic training. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition I feared?'" That's the power of practicing poverty, not romanticizing deprivation, but dismantling the illusion that comfort equals security. Imagine your worst fear, losing your job, your savings, your status, and then realizing you'd still have your resourcefulness, your adaptability, your bare hands. That's the revelation waiting in temporary minimalism. Modern life wires us to conflate wants with needs. Your phone buzzes with ads convincing you that happiness lies in the next purchase, the upgraded model, the trendier neighborhood. But the Stoics' new luxury is a slippery slope. The more you have, the more you fear losing. That's why Epictetus, born into slavery, warned, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." This isn't a call to abandon ambition, it's an invitation to test your freedom. When you voluntarily step away from conveniences, you expose how many of them are cages in disguise. Try this experiment. Pick one day this month for a poverty day. Wear your oldest clothes, eat simple meals, rice and beans perhaps, leave your phone at home. Walk instead of driving. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, even irritating, but lean into that discomfort. Notice how your mind rebels, spinning stories about what you're missing out on. Then watch as those stories unravel when you realize you're still breathing, still thinking, still you. The goal isn't to live this way permanently, but to prove to yourself that you could. Because when you know you can thrive with less, no market crash or missed paycheck can shatter your peace. History's most resilient figures shared this practice. Teddy Roosevelt voluntarily endured blizzards in the Dakota Badlands to toughen his body and mind. Buddhist monks still beg for meals not because they must, but to stay grounded in humility. Even Silicon Valley tech elites experiment with digital poverty, dumb phones, internet fasts, to reclaim focus from the tyranny of convenience, the common thread. Voluntary discomfort inoculates against involuntary suffering. Your challenge isn't to give up luxuries forever, but to break their spell. Next time you're tempted to complain about slow Wi-Fi or a cold shower, pause and channel Seneca. Is this the condition I feared? The answer will surprise you, because true wealth isn't measured in what you own, but in how little you need to feel whole. Marcus Aurelius had a simple rule for dealing with insults. When another blames you or hates you, go to their soul and see what sort of people they are. That's not passive indifference, it's surgical precision. Picture someone throwing a rock at you, but instead of catching it, you step aside and let it shatter against the ground. The Stoics understood that insults only stick if you provide the glue. Think of the last time someone criticized your work, mocked your choices, or questioned your worth. That sting you felt, it wasn't in their words, it was in your belief that those words held some authority over your self-worth. Let's role-play a modern scenario. A coworker smirks and says, "That presentation was amateur hour, did you even prepare?" The knee-jerk reaction might be defensiveness or self-doubt, but the Stoic response starts with a question: does this person's opinion define reality? If they're known for lazy work themselves, their critique carries the weight of a feather. If they're genuinely skilled, maybe there's a kernel of useful feedback buried under the rudeness, but you'll only find it if you refuse to take the bait. Epictetus, who endured slavery and constant degradation, put it bluntly: if someone tried to hand you their dirty laundry, would you take it? Then why take their dirty words? History offers masterclasses in this practice. When Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a barrel, was mocked by Alexander the Great, he simply replied, "You're blocking my sunlight." The emperor's power meant nothing to a man who'd already stripped life down to essentials. Or consider Eleanor Roosevelt's twist on Stoicism. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. The common thread: insults are like fire, they need oxygen to burn. Withhold your reaction and they gutter out. Here's your challenge: recall one insult that lingered in your mind. Now dissect it with Stoic tools. First, separate the content from the container. Was there truth in the criticism, independent of how it was delivered? If so, extract that like gold from ore useful, no matter the source. If not, recognize the insult for what it is: noise. Second, ask, what does this say about the insulter? Insecure people project, hurt people lash out. Their words often reveal more about their inner turmoil than your worth. The final step: practice the art of the non-reaction. Next time someone tries to hand you their verbal garbage, imagine it passing straight through you like a ghost, not because you're weak, but because you've got better things to carry. As Marcus wrote in his private notes, the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. Let fools shout into the void while you keep building. After all, a lion doesn't lose sleep over the opinion of sheep. Epictetus offered a startling prescription for happiness. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. This flips modern consumer culture on its head, where every advertisement whispers that joy lies in the next purchase, the upgraded model, the newer version. The discipline of desire isn't about deprivation. It's about recognizing how often we chase things not because we truly need them, but because we've been conditioned to want them. Think of your smartphone. The one you own right now likely does everything necessary, yet when a new model launches, a quiet itch develops. That's not organic desire, that's manufactured craving. The Stoics saw this trap 2,000 years ago and built an antidote: the deliberate practice of distinguishing between wants and needs. Consider the modern phenomenon of retail therapy, using shopping to numb stress or boredom. A study in the Journal of Consumer Psychology found that 62% of spontaneous purchases are driven by emotional triggers, not practical needs. The Stoic approach would dissect this impulse with surgical precision. Is this purchase serving my deeper values, or is it a temporary salve for discomfort? Epictetus, who lived with just a wooden bowl until he saw a child drinking from cupped hands and threw even that away, wasn't advocating poverty. He was demonstrating freedom, the lightness that comes when you're no longer tethered to possessions for your sense of worth. This discipline shines brightest in contrast to today's attention economy. Social media platforms are essentially desire engineering machines, constantly dangling images of vacations we didn't consider taking, gadgets we didn't know we needed, and lifestyles that suddenly make our own feel inadequate. The Stoic remedy: periodic exposure to the opposite. Just as Seneca would practice poverty by sleeping on the floor, try a desire fast: a day without online shopping, a week unsubscribing from promotional emails, or a month wearing only your most basic outfits. You'll discover something liberating. The less you feed cravings, the quieter they become. Here's the challenge before sunset today: identify one desire you'll consciously resist. Maybe it's that extra coffee you don't truly need, the impulse scroll through sale listings, or the urge to upgrade a perfectly functional item. Pause at the moment of temptation and ask Epictetus's question: will this make me more virtuous or just more comfortable? Comfort isn't the enemy, but when it becomes the compass, we lose sight of richer destinations. True abundance isn't about having everything you want. It's about wanting less of what doesn't truly matter. The irony: that's when you realize you've had enough all along. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, kept a surprising habit. He sought teachers everywhere, even in people who annoyed him. In his private writings, he noted, I can learn from the arrogant man patience, from the gossip discretion, from the angry self-control. That's the essence of the Stoic teacher, not just the sage on the mountaintop, but the difficult colleague, the frustrating relative, even the stranger who cuts you off in traffic. Every interaction becomes a classroom if you're willing to enroll. Take someone at work who constantly takes credit for your ideas. The instinct is resentment, but the Stoic approach asks, what's being taught here? Maybe it's a lesson in clearer communication or an invitation to document your contributions. Perhaps it's revealing a workplace culture that needs addressing. Even the pettiest behavior holds a mirror to our own triggers. Why does this bother me so much? Is it ego, insecurity? The Stoics believed the people who irritate us most are often our most valuable instructors, precisely because they expose our hidden fault lines. History's greatest minds practiced this. Benjamin Franklin credited his success to studying rivals more than allies. Eleanor Roosevelt transformed critics into teachers who taught me what not to do. Even nature follows this principle. Pearls form around irritants. The key is shifting from "why are they like this" to "what can I learn from this?" That subtle reframe turns adversaries into unwitting mentors. Here's your challenge. Identify one person who consistently frustrates you, a condescending neighbor, a flaky friend, a micromanaging boss. Instead of ruminating on their flaws, mine them for lessons. If they're unreliable, they're teaching you to set better boundaries. If they're negative, they're training your ability to stay grounded amidst chaos. Even a toxic person offers a masterclass in what you refuse to become. The true test comes when you thank them mentally, not for their behavior, but for the strength it's building in you. As Marcus wrote, the obstacle becomes the way. The co-worker who undermines you, they're just a strenuous workout for your patience. The relative who lectures. A pop quiz in emotional detachment. When you start seeing the world this way, no encounter is wasted. Teachers wear many disguises. Some arrive with kindness, others with sandpaper. Both polish you smooth if you let them. Epictetus offered a nautical metaphor that still steers us true today. Remember that you are like the captain of a ship. You may cling to the helm, but you can't control the winds. That's the paradox of control in action. The more desperately we grip the wheel, the more we exhaust ourselves fighting currents beyond our command. Picture a parent hovering over their teenager, micromanaging homework, friendships, even clothing choices. The intention is love, but the effect is suffocation for both parties. The child feels stifled, the parent perpetually anxious, all because of an unspoken belief that total control equals perfect safety. The Stoics knew better. True peace comes not from commanding every wave, but from learning to sail skillfully amidst them. Parenting is just one visible example of this universal tension. Consider how we approach health. You can meal prep, exercise, and sleep well, controlling what's yours to command, but you can't dictate genetic predispositions or random illnesses. Or think about creative work. An artist can master technique and show up daily at the easel, but they can't force inspiration or public reception. The moment we conflate effort with entitlement, I did everything right, so life owes me success, we set ourselves up for frustration. The Stoic alternative: give full commitment to your actions while releasing death grips on outcomes. History's wisest navigators embraced this balance. Viking sailors followed stars but adjusted sails to shifting winds. Jazz musicians master scales so thoroughly that improvisation becomes second nature. Even elite athletes train for variables they can't predict. A boxer drilling footwork knows the opponent's moves remain unknown. What unites these examples is a disciplined focus on personal agency paired with radical acceptance of external uncertainty. Here's where the paradox reveals its gift. Surrendering illusions of control doesn't make you passive. it makes you precise. When you stop wasting energy on unchangeable factors, you amplify your power where it actually matters. A CEO who obsesses over stock prices burns out. One who focuses on product quality and team culture thrives regardless of market whims. A gardener who frets over weather patterns misses the joy of tending soil they can influence. Your challenge today: identify one area where you've been clinging to the helm unnecessarily, maybe a relationship you're trying to fix, a future you're overplanning, or an old mistake you're still wrestling with. Then practice the sailor's wisdom, adjust your sails, tend your part of the ship, and let the winds blow where they may, because the ocean isn't your enemy, it's your medium. Mastery lies not in commanding the sea, but in dancing with it. Imagine lying on your deathbed, looking back at your life, not with regret for what you did, but with aching sorrow for what you didn't. The trips you postponed, the conversations you avoided, the dreams you shelved for someday. That's the heart of the Stoic deathbed exercise, a visceral confrontation with mortality, designed to strip away life's trivialities and expose what truly matters. Seneca put it bluntly: you act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. We waste our days chasing promotions and possessions while neglecting the very things that will flash before our eyes in those final moments. Love poured out, risks taken, moments fully lived. This isn't morbid fantasy, it's urgent clarity. Picture two versions of your future self. One, frail and gasping, whispers, "I wish I'd worked more overtime." The other, eyes brimming with peace, murmurs, "I'm glad I held my child a little longer." Which feels true? That's the question the deathbed exercise forces us to answer. The Stoics didn't dwell on death to depress themselves. They used it as a whetstone to sharpen their priorities. When you compress time down to its essence, those last imagined breaths, you instantly recognize the difference between a life of accumulation and a life of meaning. History's most impactful figures practiced this. Steve Jobs famously asked himself daily, "If today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do?" Not as a hypothetical, but as a filter, the answer guided his boldest decisions, from dropping out of college to battling cancer with unflinching presence. Or consider the Japanese concept of ikigai, the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. The deathbed lens distills this further. What will echo when you're gone? Here's your challenge. Grab paper and write a letter from your future deathbed self to who you are right now. Not flowery platitudes, but raw, loving honesty. What would that wiser version plead with you to stop tolerating? Maybe it's the toxic job you're clinging to for security, or the resentment you've nursed for years like a bitter trophy. What would they beg you to start? Perhaps reaching out to an estranged sibling, or finally creating that art you keep dismissing as impractical. The key is specificity. Spend more time with family is too vague. Try coach Ava's soccer games even when work is busy, or ask dad about his childhood before it's too late. The twist: this exercise isn't about adding more to your to-do list, it's about ruthless subtraction. Seneca observed, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The deathbed letter reveals what deserves your limited days and what's been masquerading as important. That argument you rehearsed in the shower, your dying self wouldn't care. The perfect Instagram caption, irrelevant, but the handwritten note you've been meaning to send, the quiet morning walk with your partner, the courage to pivot careers. Those are the threads that weave a life without regret. Try this tonight. Place your handwritten deathbed letter where you'll see it daily, taped to your bathroom mirror, folded in your wallet. Let it be the compass that recalibrates your choices when the noise of modern life grows deafening. Because when you live with the end in mind, something miraculous happens. You stop postponing joy, mistaking comfort for fulfillment, or waiting for permission to become who you're meant to be. As Seneca wrote, life is long enough if you know how to use it. The clock is ticking, yes, but every second is a gift when you spend it on what truly lights your soul. Marcus Aurelius described his mind as an inner citadel, a fortress of calm that no external chaos could penetrate, but even emperors need moments to recharge. He wrote, "Nowhere can you retreat more peacefully than within your own soul." That's the power of the Stoic pause, not a lengthy meditation or elaborate ritual, but a fleeting moment of stillness amidst life's whirlwind. Imagine your mind as a snow globe constantly shaken by demands and distractions. The pause is simply setting it down, letting the flakes settle until clarity emerges. This practice isn't about escaping reality, it's about anchoring yourself in it. Think of a pilot navigating turbulence. They don't fight the storm, they focus on their instruments. Your breath is that instrument. Try this now. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4. No special posture or setting required, that's all. In just 12 seconds, you've created a buffer between stimulus and reaction, a space where wisdom can whisper. The Stoics didn't have smartphones, but they understood attention's fragility. Seneca would take evening walks without companions, not to isolate himself, but to commune with his thoughts. Modern neuroscience confirms what these ancients intuited. Studies at Harvard reveal that even brief mindful pauses lower cortisol levels and sharpen decision-making. It's like hitting the refresh button on your browser, except the web page is your perspective. Consider how athletes use timeouts, not to quit the game, but to regroup and return stronger. Your mental clarity deserves the same strategic breaks. Here's your challenge. Tomorrow, pause 3 times, not when it's convenient, but when it's least convenient. When your inbox pings relentlessly, pause. When an argument tempts you to react, pause. Even mid-conversation, it's okay to say, "Let me think for a moment." These micro-retreats aren't avoidance, they're recalibrations. Like a photographer adjusting focus, you're ensuring life's blur doesn't become your normal. The beauty lies in its simplicity. No apps, no gear, just the ancient technology of your lungs and awareness. As Marcus reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Each pause is a gentle reclaiming of that power, so when the world shouts, you'll respond from stillness, not noise. And in that space between breaths, you'll find something extraordinary, the unshakable calm of your own inner citadel. Epictetus compared life to wrestling, not to break us, but to reveal what we're made of. Difficulties show what men are, he wrote. Think of resistance not as an enemy to defeat, but as the iron that tempers steel. A weightlifter doesn't curse the barbell for being heavy. They recognize it's the very thing building their strength. Every ounce of resistance is an invitation to grow stronger, to dig deeper. This is the heart of the Stoic opposition, the understanding that friction isn't an obstacle to peace, but the path to it. Consider a marathon runner hitting the wall at mile 20. Their legs scream to stop, their mind floods with excuses. But seasoned runners know this crisis point isn't the end, it's the threshold. Push through it and the body adapts, unlocking endurance that seemed impossible moments before. Life's challenges work the same way, that co-worker who constantly undermines you. They're your emotional endurance training, the project that keeps hitting roadblocks. That's your problem-solving stamina being tested. The Stoics didn't just tolerate opposition, they welcomed it like athletes craving a tougher opponent. Because soft training breeds weak results. History's most resilient figures embodied this. Nelson Mandela transformed 27 years of prison into a forge for his character, emerging not with bitterness, but with a vision powerful enough to heal a nation. Beethoven composed his greatest symphonies after losing his hearing, proving creativity isn't dependent on perfect conditions, it thrives despite them. Even nature follows this principle. Trees that weather storms develop the deepest roots. Resistance isn't just something to survive, it's the very force that shapes excellence. Here's your challenge. Pick one current difficulty, a demanding project, a strained relationship, even a personal habit you're struggling to change, and reframe it as your training ground. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this preparing me for?" That subtle shift in perspective transforms burdens into workouts. The next time you face resistance, channel the Stoic wrestler, not avoiding the struggle, but leaning into it with the certainty that every hold you escape makes you harder to pin down tomorrow. Because the obstacle isn't just the way, it's the gym, and you're not just surviving the workout, you're becoming stronger because of it. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings with a simple ritual. Before stepping into his role as emperor, he'd remind himself, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." This wasn't grand philosophizing. It was deliberate training in noticing the ordinary miracles we walk past every day. Stoic gratitude isn't about ignoring life's hardships. It's about refusing to let them blind us to the quiet marvels that persist even in chaos. Think of it as emotional contrast therapy. When you consciously appreciate the warmth of sunlight through a window or the comfort of a friend's voice, you're not denying the storm clouds, you're strengthening your ability to see through them. Modern research echoes this ancient wisdom. Studies at UC Berkeley found that participants who kept a nightly gratitude list for just 3 weeks reported significantly higher happiness levels and even stronger immune function. But the Stoics took it deeper. They saw gratitude as armor against entitlement, that toxic belief that the world owes us comfort. Seneca wrote, "What fortune has made yours is not your own," a reminder that everything from our health to our next meal is borrowed, not guaranteed. When you truly absorb that truth, irritation over a delayed train melts into awe that you're riding a metal bullet across land at unimaginable speeds, a miracle your ancestors couldn't have dreamed of. Start small tonight with 5 concrete gratitudes, not vague, "I'm thankful for family," generalities, but vivid specifics. The way my coffee steamed this morning, my knees bending without pain, the text my sister sent just when I needed it. This precision matters. Neuroscientists call it savoring, a mental spotlight that intensifies positive experiences. The more sensory detail you include, the crunch of autumn leaves underfoot, the citrus scent of peeled oranges, the more neural pathways light up, weaving gratitude into your neural architecture. Here's the twist. The Stoics especially treasured gratitude for challenges. Marcus thanked his difficult stepfather for teaching him resilience, and his backstabbing political rivals for keeping him sharp. Try adding one stretch gratitude to your list, something that initially stung but ultimately strengthened you. Maybe it's the job rejection that redirected your path, or the illness that taught you patience. This isn't toxic positivity, it's alchemy transforming leaden experiences into golden wisdom. Tonight, before sleep resets your mind, borrow a Stoic exercise. Hold your hand over your heartbeat and list 5 things that made today survivable, even beautiful. The rhythm under your palm is the drumbeat of a borrowed life, one you'll someday return. As Marcus wrote, "The things you take for granted, someone else is praying for." Gratitude doesn't change your circumstances, it changes your eyes, and in that shift you'll find the world hasn't been withholding joy. You've been overlooking its quiet offerings all along. Seneca, who endured exile, chronic illness, and eventual execution, left us a surprising prescription for hardship. We should make light of all things and endure them with tolerance. It's more civilized to laugh at life than to lament it. This is the Stoic laugh, not naive avoidance, but the deliberate choice to meet adversity with a wink rather than a wince. Imagine carrying an umbrella in a downpour and suddenly deciding to dance in the rain instead of cursing it. That shift from resistance to playful acceptance is where Stoic humor thrives. It doesn't deny the storm, it refuses to let the storm dictate your mood. Consider the legendary wit of Winston Churchill during the Blitz. As bombs rained on London, he was told the Treasury building had been hit. Good, he deadpanned. Now we'll know if the money was well spent. In that moment, Churchill wasn't ignoring the danger, he was defanging it with levity. Psychologists call this cognitive reappraisal, but the Stoics knew it centuries earlier. When you reframe a threat as a punchline, you reclaim power over your emotional response. Humor becomes a psychological flak jacket, absorbing the blast of life's explosions without letting them penetrate your core. This practice isn't about forced positivity. There's a stark difference between toxic cheerfulness, just smile, and Stoic lightness, the kind that acknowledges pain while refusing to let it monopolize your spirit. Think of Viktor Frankl, who even in Auschwitz whispered jokes to fellow prisoners. Humor, he wrote, was another of the soul's weapons in the fight for self-preservation. That's the Stoic laugh in its purest form, not a denial of suffering, but a declaration that suffering won't get the last word. Your challenge today: find one trivial annoyance, a spilled coffee, a missed bus, a Wi-Fi outage, and treat it as improv material. When your phone slips from your pocket, channel Seneca. Gravity still works. When your sandwich falls jelly side down, salute Murphy's Law like an old frenemy. These aren't just quips, they're tiny rebellions against the tyranny of frustration. Every time you laugh at life's hiccups, you're training a muscle far more powerful than endurance. You're cultivating joy on demand. Because the ultimate joke's on circumstance. The more you laugh in its face, the less control it has over you. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, throw it away. There are brambles in the path, step around them." But he might have added, "and if you trip anyway." Laugh loud enough to startle the birds. After all, what's life but the universe's longest-running improv show where the best performers know even tragedies can hide punchlines, if you're brave enough to deliver them. We've journeyed through 35 timeless Stoic techniques, each one a tool to forge unshakable resilience in the chaos of modern life. But here's the truth no ancient philosopher would sugarcoat. Mental indestructibility isn't about becoming invincible. It's about learning to bend without breaking, to meet turbulence with a steady gaze, and to find your footing even when the ground keeps shifting beneath you. These practices aren't magic spells, they're daily disciplines like strength training for your mind. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet wrote reminders to himself about controlling his temper. Or Epictetus, who taught that freedom lies not in controlling life's storms, but in mastering how you stand within them. Consider the archer who practices for years, not to guarantee every arrow hits the mark, but to trust their form even when the wind blows hard. That's what these techniques offer, not perfection, but progress. Not the absence of fear or pain, but the courage to move through them. Epictetus put it perfectly. No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. Your mental resilience is no different. It grows in the quiet consistency of showing up again and again, especially when it feels uncomfortable. Now, here's where philosophy meets action. Don't let this be just another video you watch and forget. The Stoics didn't write their wisdom for applause, they wrote it to be lived. So choose one technique that resonated with you today. Maybe it's the dichotomy of control, helping you focus on what's truly yours to change. Or negative visualization, turning fear into preparedness. It could be as simple as the Stoic pause, taking 3 breaths before reacting. Then, do something radical, put it into practice before the day ends. Share your choice in the comments to hold yourself accountable and to inspire others on this same path. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew: transformation doesn't happen in the grand gestures, but in the small, stubborn decisions to act differently. Every time you respond to frustration with patience or meet uncertainty with curiosity, you're not just surviving chaos, you're rewriting your relationship with it. And that's how ordinary people become extraordinary, not by waiting for easier circumstances, but by building an unshakable mind right in the middle of the storm. The tools are in your hands now. The only question left is, which one